Arizona rancher arrested. His name is George Allen Kelly, 73 years old. He had his initial appearance, and a bunch of new filings hit the docket that we will cover today, including the complaint, a motion to continue. He's scheduled for court for a preliminary hearing on February 22nd. There was a motion to modify his release conditions. He's currently being held on a $1 million bail for allegedly murdering somebody who was on his property, an individual named Gabriel Cuen Buitimia. And this is a person whose details are unknown. We don't know much more about this individual, but we do know where this took place. It is coming from Keno Springs, Arizona, which is not too far from the border. It's actually right on the border. And the background from the story comes over from Arizona Central, and they've got some details for us. They say an Arizona rancher is accused of shooting and killing a Mexican citizen. That's what we know. This is the story. They say a Keno Springs area rancher is accused of shooting and killing somebody. His name is George Allen Kelly, 74, first-degree murder charges. Victim, 48-year-old Gabriel Cuen Buitimia, Mexican voter registration card. Now, we're going to go through all of the filings. He has a public defender limited in capacity. I believe she's a public defender, or she's just a court-appointed attorney. So she may not actually be, I don't want to misspeak, she may just be somebody who has a contract, but her name is Brenna Larkin, and she is filing motions on behalf of George. We have the preliminary hearing scheduled for February 22nd. They give us some background. They say, here's what we know. The U.S. Border Patrol first contacted the sheriff's office, active shooter situation. That was back on January 30th. Border Patrol received a report from a person at the scene identified as Allen in a sheriff's dispatch report. Was unsure if he was getting shot at as well, according to one news outlet. So it's all taking place in Nogales. They are outside of Nogales in Arizona, right on the border. Cuen Buitimia's body was found about 100 and 150 yards from his home. One visible gunshot wound. No weapon found on or near the victim. Roughly a mile and a half north of the U.S. border, there was a GoFundMe that was set up, but that was shut down for violating terms of service. They have created another Give, Send, Go on the Christian fundraising website. They've already raised $177,000 there. So he's had several court hearings. We're going to go through some of the filings over on the mind map, and we don't know exactly who the deceased individual is, but we have more information from the initial appearance, as well as the most recent filings that came out of the court. So I want to start by going through the initial appearance itself. This was the proceeding that took place out in Nogales, Arizona. This was the one involving George Allen Kelly, the Arizona rancher charged with murder for allegedly shooting and killing a Mexican citizen. Now, it is quiet right now. The courtroom is empty. We're going to see the door opens. There are people coming in, and this is George Kelly's family or wife and other people. And the reason you can surmise that without knowing anything is because they're sitting on this side of the courtroom. So in this courtroom, you see the jury panel looks like it's over here on the right side. That's where the jury would sit. The defendant typically sits opposite of the jury. And so they're sitting on this far side. The family is in here. The deceased, the victim of the crime, the alleged victim, doesn't appear to have anybody sitting on the prosecutor's side. One person stands up. They're all behind the bar, so they're not his legal counsel. Don't know what this person has in his hand, taking some notes. Looks like the court bailiff is also in there. So we've got one police officer. Then we have the security guard. Typically, these are the sheriff's department, the people who are housing the defendants. So one security guard from the sheriff's department brings out the defendant, which is George, 73 years old. So slowly walks out and they sit him down. And the family's still seated there. Now, you're not allowed to talk across the bar, right? You're not allowed. So he's not allowed to turn around and say hi to his wife or say hi to his family or anything like that. Very strict rules. He'll get in trouble. And so you've got the sheriff's deputy who's sort of standing over here. You've got another law enforcement officer who does courtroom security. And then you've got the transport security team there. So we now have Mr. Kelly sitting down, and we'll see if this picks up here. We'll fast forward a little bit. We have another person who comes into the courtroom sitting on the prosecution side. So this is the prosecution's table. and don't know who that individual is. Oftentimes, these people might be just victims advocates. So anytime there's a victim of a crime, they'll bring in a victim's advocate. And, oh, the judge is on the phone now. Let's listen.
Court is now in session. I'm presiding Judge Emilio Velasquez. This is a time and date set for the arraignment on case number 2023-00041, State of Arizona versus George Allen Kelly. And if I can have the defendant please state his name for the record.
George Allen Kelly.
And your date of birth.
January 27, 1949.
Thank you. And do you have the complaint, please? Can you please provide him with a complaint? And Mr. Kelly, just so you're aware, is that the Nogales International has filed a request to be in the courtroom and record this session today. And also YouTube will be broadcasting this hearing today.
Okay, so we don't know. Maybe that's who that individual was. Nogales International. Maybe they are there. Maybe that's who that individual was. But I want to point out now we have 4 sheriff's deputies or transportation deputies who are in the courtroom now. So we got 1, 2, 3, plus a police officer who does courtroom security, all in the courtroom for the 73-year-old man.
May I ask a question, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
I can't read without my reading glasses.
Okay.
They're not prescription reading glasses, just 1.5 magnification or anywhere close to that.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and have these glasses provided to you so you can go ahead and see the complaint.
Thank you.
And I just want to make sure that you heard what I said right now and that you have full awareness.
Yes, sir. I heard what you said, and I'm aware of everything I can hear. And now, thanks to you, I'll be aware of what I can read.
Very good.
I can open them. Okay. All
right.
Should I read this, Your Honor?
No. So I'm going to go ahead and read you. What I'm going to ask is that you remain quiet unless I ask questions of you, Mr. Kelly. All right. So it appears that you have 1 count against you, and that's first-degree murder. It's alleged that on or about the 30th day of January of 2023, intending or knowing that this conduct would cause death with premeditation, did cause the death of the victim with the initials of GCB, and that's a Class 1 felony. So you are presumed to be innocent until proven guilty by the state beyond reasonable doubt. You do have the right to a
That's
lawyer,
what they tell you.
the right to cross-examine witnesses, and the right to present your own witnesses at a pretrial, and the right to appeal. Do you understand that you have these rights?
Yes, sir, Your Honor.
At this time, I'm going to plead you not guilty. Please be advised that if you're not a citizen of the United States, pleading guilty or no contest to a crime may affect your immigration status. Admitting guilt may result in deportation even if the charge is later dismissed. Your plea or admission of guilt could result in deportation or removal, could affect your legal status in the United States or from becoming a United States citizen, and that is an immigration clause that has to be disclosed to all defendants. So I did receive your financial statement for the purpose of appointing an attorney. So I'm going to have you sworn in to this information, okay?
Yes, Your Honor.
So some of you are asking why he does not have a lawyer yet. This is an initial appearance, and so the judge is going to go through this form and explain, or actually verify his finances and say, well, do you make enough money? Can you afford a lawyer on your own? And if you can, well, then we're not going to pay for one for you. You just go find your own lawyer. Now, there's a little bit of a complexity in this situation that is going to be very interesting. One, he's in Nogales, Arizona. All right. It's a very small town. There's not a huge legal community down there. Okay. Most lawyers, and I don't want to overgeneralize here, but most of all of the big firms are in Phoenix. Okay. They're all in Phoenix, Arizona. You're going to have some large reputable firms further south of us in Tucson do great work and all of that. But that might be the closest city center for lawyers, which is probably still, 2 hours away. So my point is he's in a very difficult jurisdiction to reach. You're not going to get tons of lawyers who just want to go out and deal with a major felony case on the border when they're literally 4 hours away up in Phoenix, right? It's kind of a difficult thing. And he's also now, depending on how they charge this, right? If they're going to charge this with as a capital offense with capital murder or anything like that, if that comes down the pike later down the line, then you have a smaller batch of lawyers, right? Because you have to be capital certified if they're going to be going after the death penalty and stuff like that, right? My point is, depending on the severity of the charge, they will, the law provides him with counsel and based on the type of charge. But at this moment, right, it's still so early. This is the initial appearance. The judge is having him. This is just the formal stuff. He's going through the financial affidavit. They're going to say, do you make enough money to go hire your own lawyer? That's why nobody's in the courtroom with him. Now, oftentimes when I was at R&R Law Group, people would hire us before this court date, right? People would say, man, I just got arrested. I'm sitting in jail. And so we would be there. I've done many IAs in felony court, down the street in Superior Court. But this has happened so quickly, and because there's no lawyers available, and he's sort of in the middle of of a rural area as a rancher, he's kind of on his own right now.
All right, I just need you to raise your right hand. Do you swear that the information you provided here is the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. So, Mr. Kelly, I did review this, and I just wanted to ask you, on the first time that we met, did you mention that you had a ranch?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. So is that what you're including here as mortgage?
No, Your Honor. It also includes my home, which is on the ranch.
All right. Is that under your name, sir?
My wife and I name.
Okay. So then I don't know that this is complete then, right? Because the information that I have here shows you pretty indigent. And it sounds like when you mentioned that you had a ranch, it sounds like you may have some collateral. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and appoint an attorney for the sake of today's hearing and moving forward. I'm going to go ahead and appoint an attorney. But I will tell you that it's an indigent attorney list, right? Public defenders.
Would you kindly...
Well, just one moment. So what's going to happen is you're either going to have to retain your own attorney, or you're going to have to go ahead and talk to the attorney that will temporarily be appointed and discuss with her her rates.
I will talk to the attorney that you're going to appoint.
All right, very well. So at this time then, I'm going to go ahead and appoint Ms. Brenda Larkin, and she will be coming into the jail to see you. So at this time, Mr. Kelly, then, I'm going to continue to hold you on the $1 million cash bond. If you post the bond and you're released, these are your conditions. You're to notify the court of any change of address, appear to all your hearings, and you're not to violate any federal, state, or local laws. You're not to leave the state without written permission from the courts. You're not to drive without a valid driver's license. You're not to possess any firearms or illegal drugs. You're not to have any contact with the family, the victims of the family, and if required by the court, you may be drug or alcohol tested. Is that understood?
Yes, Your Honor.
But he's not getting out or going anywhere, so...
Your next hearing is going to be the 8th of February, and it will be at 9 o'clock in the morning.
That got continued. It's now February 22nd. That also is very unlikely, I think, to take place. We'll talk about that in a minute as we go through the docket.
I just need you to go ahead and complete the demographic information on the bottom of the form, please.
Do I do that now, Your Honor?
That is correct, Mr. Kelly.
All right, so they bring him the form, and they bring him a pen, and so he's going to fill it out. So we'll fast forward just a little bit through that. You can see him still in handcuffs.
Print my name or sign it.
Still in handcuffs with 4 security officials there. Filling out the paperwork. Now turns it over to the bailiff.
You used the word indigent. Would you please give me your definition of indigent?
It's someone that has an income, a certain income, that doesn't qualify them for, that qualifies them for a hired attorney. But somebody who's not, that doesn't make a certain amount of money a year, right? So it'd be somebody who's not making more than probably $20,000, $25,000 a year.
That's more than accurate. I understand.
Thank you.
So that's more than accurate. He says, I understand. They bring him another form. He says, all right, you're going to have to sign this. And there's going to be another form. We'll take a quick look at it, basically acknowledging that he heard everything the judge said, right? So this is a very, very basic, very quick proceeding. Sometimes these things take, less than 2 minutes, honestly. If you had a
Your
lawyer
Honor,
there,
ask one more question at appropriate time.
One moment, please.
If a lawyer were there, all of this stuff would have been dealt with before, and it would have been a 2-minute proceeding, if that. But they're filling out all this paperwork. And the judge said, hang on a minute. You can see the family's talking back there. And the court bailiff or the court security told him to stop talking, went up there and said, stop talking. And the judge is still reviewing things.
This is coming in, Your Honor.
So he asks a question here.
Go ahead and proceed, Mr. Kelly.
I noticed coming in, Your Honor, my wife is present in the court. May I ask her to make an appointment for an audio-visual conference, and I've not been able to talk to her or anyone?
So that's something that has to be discussed with the detention facility downstairs. So that conversation would have to be had with them, sir. Okay.
So he can't turn around and say anything to his wife. Okay. This is a very frustrating thing that happens. And it's very frustrating when you're in there with a client and they want to just say hello to their wife or their daughter or somebody who's there with them. They are not allowed to talk. So oftentimes a lawyer will be there to facilitate and communicate back and forth. But in this case, he doesn't have an attorney, so it's just him alone. Fortunately, his wife probably heard that. Okay, so you can kind of talk to them without talking to them by asking questions. See how he did that, which was very nice. So she will get the message to go down and set up a phone call, but this is how it goes.
So if your wife wants to have communication with you, she can go to the sheriff's office and they can go ahead and make the proper accommodations that they need to make.
I appreciate you giving that instruction.
So the proceeding is coming to a close. The judge is finalizing some paperwork. Let's see.
Any other questions, Mr. Kelly?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
Hearing's adjourned.
All rise. They all stand up, and then they're going to walk the 73-year-old rancher from Arizona, George Allen Kelly. He's trying to say something to his wife. You saw that, and they shut him that up real quick. He says over to her probably, hey, I love you. I'll see you soon. Everything's going to be okay. Says something right there. Get out of here. Turn around. And scoot on out of here. And so there he is, walking out of the courtroom, back into his prison cell, which he will be in until we have another court date. So that is the initial appearance, and I want to show you the document on that very briefly. First, here is the complaint. This was filed out of the Santa Cruz County Justice Court. You see it is the complaint charging George Allen Kelly with a first-degree murder. It says that on or about January 30th, intending or knowing that his conduct would cause death, premeditation of death, GCB, we already heard that name. This was filed and signed on the second day of February. So we have that. We also have now a notice of appearance. So you heard that the judge said that he was going to be appointing an individual to represent him. This was Brenna Larkin. She's out from a city called Tumacory in Arizona. This is her notice of appearance. And she says, look, I've been appointed to represent George Allen Kelly on this case. We also have several other filings from her. So that was the complaint. We have the initial appearance document. This is the signature of George. This is what he was filling out there when he was in court, right? This is what he was signing there on that one sheet of paper. And you can see this is basically the form that the judge fills out when they do their initial appearances. They say, okay, you're due back here on this date. You have to execute a bond. It's in the amount of $1 million. Prompt, give written notice or change of address. Don't violate the law. Can't possess firearms or illegal drugs. Of course, he's going to be in custody. Don't contact or talk to the victim's family, and so on and so forth. So all of that, of course, is just kind of the standard forms that you'll see. But there was also a motion to continue because there was a court date that was scheduled on the 8th, if you remember, and that was a little too soon. So the newly appointed defense lawyer filed a motion to continue and said, look, I need more time to do my work, to do my investigation into all of this. And there's also a motion to modify George's release conditions. The judge set release conditions, said, yeah, you can go home if you post $1 million bond. You can't go do all of this other stuff, right? Like these are the release conditions. These are the additional conditions. But if you can post that bond, then you can go free, subject to these conditions. And so what the defense attorney is asking is to modify those conditions. So let's take each one in turn, starting with the motion to continue. You see, this one was filed by Brenna Larkin down in Tumacory, Arizona. The motion to continue is written as follows. She says, all right, comes now the defendant, Mr. Kelly in this case. They say Mr. Kelly does not qualify for court-appointed counsel. Uh-oh. and he's in the process of procuring counsel to represent him. So that means that after the indigency conversation, okay, she sat down with him and they said, oh, how much money do you make and all this stuff? And she says, well, you've got too many assets. You've got too much money. So you got to go hire a lawyer. We can't help you. She says, I have just been appointed in a limited capacity. Okay, so I'm not really on this case. I'm just sort of on this case for a little bit until he gets another attorney on the case. So additionally, she says, the disclosure of the discovery, all the police reports and all the evidence from the Border Patrol and all the different agencies is fairly voluminous, and it's going to take significant time to review. And so for these reasons, we respectfully request a continuance of approximately 2 weeks. We waive time. The defense is waiving time. Remember, you have a right to a speedy trial, and if you want to exercise it, you can exercise that. The government can't delay. So when you ask for a continuance on the defense, you waive that time. That time, those 2 weeks, are not going to count against the government. The clock is not going to start running on that one. All right, so that's the motion to continue. Now, Brenna's also been working hard, and so she also drafted a motion to modify his release conditions, which is the big one. Okay, this is a good motion. This is the one that you want to file in a case like this, basically right away, to see if you can get that modified. So it's a $1 million bond. He's got all sorts of other conditions. I can't post a $1 million bond. Judge, please reduce it. Here are the arguments as to why. Here's what they say. All right, here now comes Mr. George Allen Kelly through counsel, and we request that he be released on his own recognizance in this case. Wow. Okay, that's like a big ask. That is the entirely opposite ask. All right. So on the one hand, if you want to put all this on a spectrum, on the one hand, you have no bail, no bond. Okay, like you're not getting out. There are certain offenses in Arizona, you just don't get out. You're too much of a danger. Sorry, you can't get out of custody. And so he's not in that category, but he's pretty close. He's in the next category over, which is $1 million bond, which is a big chunk of change as well. And then you have kind of, a category of you go down the line. You can also release somebody to pretrial services, and so they have somebody they're checking in with on a regular basis. You can do release conditions, drug testing, all these conditions, okay? Home confinement, all sorts of other things, right? Don't go to these locations, and the judges can do very interesting things for release conditions. But on the far end, the opposite end of no bail is no release conditions, basically. You're just free. You just go on your own. You promise to come back? Yeah. All right. You go on your own. No bond, nobody to check in with, nothing to do, essentially. Your own recognizance. So it's a big ask, right? This defense attorney is like taking the complete opposite end. In the alternative, they say, well, we respectfully request that he be released to a third party or that his bond be reduced or converted into a surety bond. What this leads me to believe is that this defense lawyer is taking a look at this case and saying, this is a garbage case, right? Because that is a big ask. To ask that he be released with no conditions, it's basically saying he's innocent. He didn't do anything wrong at all. He's not a threat to the community. He's not a danger to the community. There's no criminal culpability that we can see here. And release him on his own recognizance because he's as good as innocent. They say Mr. Kelly's request is based on the Constitution and explained further in the memorandum of law provided here. It starts with the facts. This is from George Allen Kelly's defense lawyer. Says that on January 30th, George Allen Kelly reported the discovery of a body on his property near Keno Springs, where he and his wife have lived for the past 2 decades. Earlier in the day, Mr. Kelly had completed chores on his ranch and had come to his house to eat lunch with his wife. As they ate, Mr. Kelly heard a single gunshot. Next, he saw his horse, who was old, running away scared and at full speed. Finally, he saw a group of men moving through the trees around his home. They were armed with AK-47 rifles, dressed in khakis and camouflaged clothing, and carrying large backpacks. None of them were known to him. He had not given any of them permission to come onto his land. Based on the foregoing, Mr. Kelly was understandably concerned and reasonably feared for his safety, his wife's safety, and his animal's safety. So Mr. Kelly called the U.S. Border Patrol the ranch liaison, specifically assigned to aid people living on the borderlands to report what he had seen and to summon immediate help. Mr. Kelly told his wife, stay inside, get away from the windows, and be quiet. Don't alert the men that you're here. Mr. Kelly then went onto his porch with his rifle. The leader of the armed group of men saw Mr. Kelly and pointed an AK-47 right at him. Mr. Kelly feared for his life and safety, fired several shots from his rifle, hoping to scare them away from him, his wife, and his animals and his home. As he shot, Mr. Kelly took care to aim well over the heads of the armed group of men. The group then began running into the desert surrounding his home. Once the group had fled, Mr. Kelly walked over to his barn to see if it was safe and secure. Mr. Kelly had a conversation with that Border Patrol ranch liaison again that ended at 2:36 p.m. Mr. Kelly reported that he heard a single shot and that the men he had seen were armed. The Border Patrol liaison incorrectly reported that Mr. Kelly stated he could not tell whether the men were armed or not. That's convenient. However, the dispatch on the radio to the Border Patrol agents en route at 2:40 p.m. correctly reported that the armed men had been seen in the area. All right. So this Border Patrol ranch liaison very conveniently forgot to include a key fact in this story. Kelly says they're armed. Border Patrol says, well, he couldn't tell. That's not true. He said that they were armed because when he called it in, dispatch picked it up. Correctly reported that the armed men had been seen in the area. Actually, that's not. I can see how there could be a hole there. Briefly, the hole could be. I'd like to dig into this. I would like to see what that call was. Yeah. All right. We'll just leave that one there. I have a question about this, so we'll keep our tabs on this. What did Kelly say when he called? Is the Border Patrol ranch liaison accurately or inaccurately reporting that fact? If that is an inaccurate fact, that's going to be a big problem for them because it wrecks their credibility on their reporting. That's a big problem. So we'll put a pin in that one. We'll put a nice little star on that one. That's kind of, all right, forget, that's a star. While Mr. Kelly was checking his barn, a number of Border Patrol agents and sheriffs arrived on the property. Border Patrol agents encountered Mr. Kelly, who indicated to them he had seen a group of armed men near his house. Sheriff deputies made contact with Mr. Kelly's wife, who also indicated she saw armed men near the house carrying large backpacks. So wife saw it too. Two witnesses now. Border Patrol agents and sheriff deputies walked all over Mr. Kelly's property in search of the group of people, but didn't find anybody. Border Patrol used various cameras in order to try to locate the men, but they were unsuccessful. After stating that they would document the incident and to call if Mr. Kelly needed them again, law enforcement left the property. Later that day, as the sun was going down, Mr. Kelly went to his pastures in order to check on his horse. He was still concerned that his horse might have been injured in the incident. Mr. Kelly took his dogs with him to check on the horse. After locating the horse, Mr. Kelly noticed that his dogs were focused on something on the ground near a mesquite tree. Mr. Kelly approached his dogs and observed a body lying face down in the grass. Mr. Kelly was alarmed by this discovery, and he put a lit flashlight on the ground in order to be able to find the body again. Mr. Kelly then called Border Patrol ranch liaison again in order to report the discovery and request the assistance from law enforcement. When the law enforcement showed up again, Mr. Kelly helped them to find the body, and he cooperated with their investigation. During the investigation, it was discovered that the body was that of a male foreign national. So he goes out to check on his horses later that day. The sun was going down, so it's nighttime. He approached his dogs. They find something on the ground near a mesquite tree. He sees a body lying on the ground. He goes over, shines the flashlight on it, calls Border Patrol right away. Border Patrol comes out. They discover male foreign national, no firearms or a backpack on him. Cause of death appeared to be a single gunshot wound, and it appeared the body was fresh. The person had a radio with him, and he was wearing tactical boots, indicating that he was possibly involved in illegal activity. Defense lawyer says the investigation is ongoing. Disclosure is continuing to be made to the defense. It remains unknown what kind of bullet caused the wound to the person, what the time of death was, how long the body had been in that location, or where and in what position the person was in prior to receiving the fatal wound. Do they even know he shot him? Mr. Kelly cooperated with law enforcement officials and provided an interview. He admitted to firing warning shots at the smugglers earlier the day, but denied firing any shots directly at the person. He does not believe that any of his warning shots could have possibly hit the person or caused the death. All of the shooting that Mr. Kelly did on the date was in self-defense and justified. Do they even know if it's his bullet? What? This is the defense attorney writing this. She says here, it remains unknown what kind of bullet caused the wound to the person. Do they know what kind of bullets came out of the guns they confiscated? Because then they could get the bullet and just match them. I mean, is it even the same caliber? Or was it one of the other guys who shot him and took his backpack and ran off with it and left him with his radio and his ID? One of the other people who was also illegally, doing whatever they were doing, running around with armed vehicles or armed weapons that the Border Patrol was trying to track down. Maybe they shot the guy, not Mr. Kelly. Sheriff deputies arrested and they booked Mr. Kelly. He's been charged with first-degree murder, $1 million cash bond. So they go through some of the law and analysis here, and they tell us that under Arizona law, basically, I'll fast forward through this. Basically, the law says that, bail should be the least amount possible to secure somebody's appearance, right? We have the presumption of innocence in this country still for whatever amount of time we have it left. And we want to presume that people should be out. If they're a threat to the community, if they're a danger to themselves, if they're violent criminals, and we don't want to let people out. If they're flight risks, we don't want to let them out. But she's saying that none of that is here. She says here, bond is not necessary to ensure that Kelly is going to appear. His wife's going to take him home. His wife's going to ensure his conduct and that he appears at future proceedings. He's not going anywhere. If Mr. Kelly were to be released, he's readily going to comply with all different release conditions. You can even put him on pretrial services if you want. Accordingly, the court should release him to the custody of his wife or his own recognizance rather than bond. And if you don't do that, Judge, you should reduce the bond less than $1 million. 2, they say there's no evidence that Mr. Kelly has intimidated any witnesses. There's no evidence that he is a threat to the community, right? We don't need to protect society from this guy. He's got no criminal record at all, is my understanding. So they go through more of the rules, determining the methods. It's a lot of heavy lifting, so we'll fast forward through it. She says here, considering the factors delineated above, a $1 million cash bond is clearly excessive, okay? And it seems like you're trying to keep the defendant in custody while he's trying to provide for his innocence. He can't even get a lawyer. He hasn't even spoken to his wife at that last IA yet there. And as I said, right, this is in Nogales. It's in a very far, remote part of Arizona, right on the border. There's not just a bunch of billboards with convenient lawyers all over the place. So the defense says the court is not permitted to set a bond amount that is designed to keep a defendant in custody. You must determine the lowest amount necessary to secure the person's appearance. Okay, that's the standard. You don't need to overly punish somebody. It's whatever it takes to get them to come back to court, nothing more. So they say here, the views of the victim in this case are unknown. No extended family who apparently showed up to court. We didn't see that. And I think that was the journo from the Nogales Independent. The nature and the charge of the offense, they says, yeah, it is a pretty serious allegation here. Of course, murder is a serious charge, but this was overcharged. We don't even have evidence that the bullet was his, is what this defense attorney said. He has no criminal history at all. He's not a danger to the community. She says he's 75 years old, no history that he's going to hurt anybody. He was having a difficult time walking to the bench in the court. Now, the weight of the evidence, this is from the defense attorney. She says, the evidence against Mr. Kelly is extremely weak in this case. Law enforcement was not able to locate a body when they searched Mr. Kelly's property after he fired the warning shots to warn away the armed men. They were already there before. They didn't see it. Kelly's actions are those of an innocent man. He himself called law enforcement to report the discovery of the body. Mr. Kelly cooperated with the investigation and gave a statement to law enforcement. Called them twice. No bullet has been found in order to do testing to determine which gun fired the fatal shot. It is entirely possible that a person found on Mr. Kelly's property was a victim of another drug trafficker. Yeah. The radio found in possession of the deceased person indicates this person was participating in a smuggling activity on Mr. Kelly's property. The inherent dangers of illegal smuggling, along with the fact that a group of heavily armed men was seen in the area earlier in the day, strongly points to the conclusion that the deceased victim was a victim of drug trafficking related activity. They shot him, stole his backpack, blamed it on the other guy. Now, the defense says, while not everyone maybe would have fired warning shots like Mr. Kelly did, it is important to understand that Mr. Kelly did not ask to be confronted by a group of armed men trespassing on his land near his house. Mr. Kelly's actions were justified under the law as self-defense and defense of others, including his wife. She says, quite simply, this is a case where an innocent man has been wrongfully accused of a crime. While the prosecutor believes that Mr. Kelly committed first-degree murder, the shocking lack of evidence linking him to the body makes it a far stretch for anyone to believe that Mr. Kelly murdered an unarmed person on his land with premeditation. Of all possible explanations for this person's death, this is the least plausible. Had Mr. Kelly truly murdered someone without premeditation, then he would have no incentive to call law enforcement and lead them to the body. Just drag it across the border. Which is morbid, but I mean, if he was a murderer who's trying to get away with murder, that's what he would be doing, wouldn't he? On the contrary, he would have had every incentive to dispose of the body in the vast, isolated desert surrounding his property. Yeah, Mr. Kelly would have had plenty of opportunity to do so. Instead, he chose to alert law enforcement and assist them in their investigation because he didn't do it. The accused and his family ties all show that he is very closely connected to the community. He has a wife and 2 sons. His family is extremely supportive of them. They were probably sitting there in the courtroom behind him. His sons are grown up and they live out of state. Maybe not. One of them is a professor and another is a professional horse trainer. He has a number of grandchildren. He was born in North Carolina, attended college, married his wife in the 1970s, supported his family ever since. Kelly's background involves higher education, pre-med, pre-vet studies. It was Mr. Kelly's intention to go to vet school and become a veterinarian. However, when his wife became pregnant with their first child, he began working. He worked for the National Park Service for Fish and Wildlife and eventually retired with his wife in Montana. In Montana, they opened a fishing lodge. They allowed their children to run the business, eventually sold it. They moved here to Arizona in 1997 and began ranching. They purchased the land in Keno Springs back in 2002. The house was built in 2008. They've been living there ever since. Their only income is their Social Security. Hardworking Americans, retiring, living on the border, now being charged with murder. The land and house they own free and clear. They also own land near Springerville. They say Mr. Kelly's assets are limited. They're not liquid. He describes himself as being land rich and dollar poor. They say in terms of his character and mental condition, they say he's healthy and stable. He has many friends that support him. He's maintained friendships over the year. He's not a flight risk of any kind. He firmly believes in his innocence and he's committed to being close to his wife to emotionally support her in this difficult time. He wants to support his wife while he's in custody for a crime he didn't do. Mr. Kelly has no criminal history, no trouble with the law, no problems with drugs or alcohol, always supported himself and his family. He is a man of excellent character. He is elderly and he forgets things sometimes, but he is mentally sound and stable. Never used drugs, including marijuana. It's not a meth crime. He's lived in the community for 26 years, never been arrested or charged with any other offenses. Always appeared in court. He had some civil litigation with his land, but not a big deal. He was born in North Carolina. He's a citizen and he resides here in Arizona. They say, in addition, Judge, it's also important for this court to know that Mr. Kelly has received some significant threats against his person by other inmates in the jail. You probably understand what this is looking like to everybody. Oh, a racist white Arizona rancher murdered a poor migrant who was just coming across to seek a better life in the land of the free. And so he's probably in a pretty precarious position down there. As a result, Mr. Kelly has been moved to protective custody and he's on 23-hour lockdown. Perfect. Mr. Kelly has some medical issues due to his age. In order to protect his privacy, we're not going to talk about those here, but he does need to talk to a doctor and manage his medical conditions. The defense says this case has also garnered a remarkable amount of media attention. No kidding. Mr. Kelly is concerned about his safety and well-being as well as that of his wife and his sons. Mr. Kelly and his family are private people and will not be engaging with the media regarding this case at this time. They don't want to talk about it. Finally, this case will require significant time and preparation for all the parties ready to go to trial. The defense will be requesting the services of investigators, mitigation specialists, various experts in order to prepare a defense. And holding Mr. Kelly in solitary confinement, essentially, at that time is cruel and unusual punishment. The man is 73 or 75 years old. Ridiculous. So Brenna, in an excellent motion to modify release conditions, continues and finishes in conclusion, says, based on the factors outlined above and how Mr. Kelly's particular circumstances apply to each factor, Mr. Kelly respectfully requests to be released on his own recognizance, which now, after reading this, I think is the absolute right ask. It was a bold ask at the start of this. Absolutely the right call. They don't even know the bullet matches his gun, according to this defense lawyer. Release him on his own recognizance, which just means just let him out. No bond, no bail, no connect, nothing. Basically, let him go. Or if the court's inclined to do so, release him to his wife or somebody, a third party, or reduce the amount of the bond less than $1 million. And that is signed by Brenna Larkin, attorney for the defendant. So, Matt, shout out. Good, very excellent motion from Brenna Larkin. Revealed a lot more information about this case. And it sounds way worse than I thought in terms of being overly charged and being a miscarriage of justice. Now, we have a lot to see, right? We still don't have the reports or the discovery, but we have the presumption of innocence in this country. And he still has that. He's entitled to that. And it sounds like he's getting railroaded at this point in time by an overzealous prosecutor who is trying to turn this case probably into something that it isn't. Of course, we'll wait and see. Now, that being said, just so that we're covering all of our bases here, there's another interesting thing that popped up that the prosecution, I think, is going to really try to latch onto, all right? And this might be part of the reason why this is being charged. I don't know. But if you go on Amazon and look up this book, Far Beyond the Border Fence, George Kelly, the defendant, wrote this book. And they are pointing to this. A lot of people in the media are saying this is evidence that this guy is a racist because he wrote this book. And the book, if you read the description on it, it says that it's a contemporary novel which brings the Mexican border drug conflict into the 21st century. And they say the owner of VMR Ranch, which matches the initials of the ranch that he owns, in the book, it's located in southern Arizona. It discovers that the horses are missing and that his southern fence leading to Mexico has been cut. Okay, so it's like this fictional story about a rancher in southern Arizona who has to get involved in this drug war that's going on his land between America and Mexico. So the prosecutors are latching onto that, right? They're going to say, oh yeah, this guy is just living out his little bloodlust fiction fantasy land, you know, and that is motive. I'm pretty sure we're going to see that come out from the prosecutors because this motion to modify is going to have a response. The prosecutors are going to respond and they're going to say, well, he's a danger and he's this and he's the worst and he's a murderer. And they're going to come out with more evidence, but we'll see what that looks like. In the meantime, of course, our defendant here, George Allen Kelly, does have a give, send, go. And we saw that was reported in the news articles. And so if you're inclined and you want to go support his efforts, that's where they're doing it. Of course, double check to make sure, you know, it's something comfortable you're doing and you're capable of doing that, and that it's the real thing. But there are places where you can support his efforts, and of course, he will need them. We will continue to cover this. I am a criminal defense lawyer in Arizona, no longer with the R&R Law Group, but still very much interested in justice and this case, so we will cover it. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for liking this video, wherever it is you're watching it, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one.